What's it really like inside the new Afghanistan? 4 months after the fall of Kabul to the Taliban, France 24 went to the capital and beyond to speak with citizens from all walks of life. What they heard was a mix: relief, the guns have gone quiet, and worry over the prospect of a bleak winter, what with more than half the population facing acute food shortages, international isolation, and new rulers who've yet to let women return to school and to work, and yet to prove that they can run a country. For reporters, the France 24 investigative news magazine Roméo Langlois and senior correspondent Catherine Norris-Trent filmed an exclusive documentary, Afghanistan Inside the Emirate. We're going to be seeing experts. Catherine joins us. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Francois. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us, and thanks as well for joining us in this special edition. Afghan journalist Rosina Khatibi, you hosted the big politics debate show on Afghan television.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah, and now you've been here for 20 days, you said.
Yes, it's 20 days. I came to France.
All right, and so you're a refugee for now here, and
yeah.
Well, welcome to France, and thanks so much for joining us. One man who wrote about making the conscientious decision to stay in Kabul was Obaidullah Bahir, lecturer in transitional justice at the American University of Afghanistan. Thank you for joining us from the Afghan capital.
Thank you for having me. I'm trying to make do with whatever electricity and internet we have, so I'm hoping it goes smoothly.
Well, right now you've got a crystal clear line, so fingers crossed it stays that way. The France 24 debate, where, by the way, you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, #F24debate. Well, let's begin with the impact of 20 years. The Americans are gone, but again, the impact of this campaign against the Taliban is still making headlines. We saw this week the Pentagon saying there'd be no U.S. military personnel facing charges over drone strikes in August that mistakenly killed 10 civilians, 7 of them children. Washington's owned up to it, what it calls execution errors in its in that operation, and says it is seeking to pay compensation to the families. In this case, it wasn't targeting the Taliban, but ISIS. How will that tragic mistake, along with many others, sit over time? And that brings us to our first segment. Catherine, you take us to the countryside, to Wardak province.
Yeah, just a couple of hours drive outside of Kabul to the west. We went into Wardak province, and very near to the capital, you meet countless families who've lost loved ones in what they say were indiscriminate airstrikes or night raids carried out either by the US Air Force or US drones or by the Afghan army, as it was allies of the US and special forces. And we heard countless tales of brutality, of civilians who've been killed, people buried under rubble in bombings. And then you just got this picture of a simmering anger and bitterness against the Americans, against their allied forces, and a feeling, why the Taliban could recruit so productively in these areas. Wardak was one of the biggest places they recruited from, and just how victorious they're feeling today. And people there saying they are so glad that after decades of war, not just the last 20 years, but decades of war, that the bullets have stopped flying, the bombs have stopped falling, and they're able to enjoy kind of security to go around the country. And you feel just how deep the grief is there.
In this zone, frequently targeted by brutal US and Afghan army raids, villagers lived right amongst the Taliban.
داسې وایي چې موږ د مقابلې په جریان کې داسې افغانان ته صدمه ورسېدله داسې په میلیونه هغه سو نو مجاهدین او خاصتا مسؤلین مجاهدین هغوی ټول راځي هر کله که د اختر مبارکي وي او که داسې یو بله خوشحالي وي له دوی سره له کومک کوي له دوی سره له دوی له حالت نه ځان خبروي د مرستیا له حالت نه.
For years in rural areas, the insurgents built up sympathy and their basis for victory. Now they patrol in police cars seized from the former government. Here, even doing the school run.
دا شاته چې کوم ماشومان موږ سره سپاره دي دا ټول یتیمان دي د شهدا او اولاده ده موږ اوس را سپاره کړي چې دلته مکتب ته راوړو.
Here, nearly everyone knows someone killed in an American raid. For the Taliban, recruitment was easy.
کله افغانستان ته ښځې رانه دراوړی خلکو ته خدمت نه ده کړی بلکې دوی د اشغال لپاره راغلي و بیرته خدای وشرمه ولاړ خپل هیواد.
دوی پسې نه جلبېزار شته د امارت له خوا نه په چا باندې فشار شته نه څوک په زور باندې راکش کېږي نو بلکې افغانان د عقیدې له رویه د خپل اسلامیت له رویه نه خپله راجګېږي دوی خپله راځي جهاد سپو ته راځي.
So, Catherine, did you get the sense that some of what you filmed was staged for the cameras?
Really interesting question because obviously, so we were there filming. The Taliban were with us, local members, and so that was very much one of the things you have to take into account, considering, given that filming. But people's responses to us were spontaneous. You could feel the anger and the grief of that young girl we saw at the beginning was the only survivor of an airstrike. In 2018, which flattened the family home. And you could really feel that, despite the Taliban does have a communication strategy, things that they want to present to the international press, but you could also feel that sense of grief and sadness and anger still as well.
Yeah, you can. The looks on the faces there it's palpable that people are upset about what's happened.
I want to say, as we saw in the report, the Taliban saying that we are responsible of these people and we want to take this orphan to school. It is a kind of show, as I see in Afghanistan. It's just a show to show the international world that we are good people. No one will forget the things the Taliban did in Afghanistan. That they killed thousands of people in Afghanistan, and still it's a process that they do. They're just showing this. I'm sure that, when I came from Afghanistan, it's a kind of situation that no one can explain it. Just we can cry about this situation. When I'm remembering the situation that I saw in Afghanistan, so just we can cry about it. I think Catherine know better because she went to Afghanistan and she saw how kind of situation we saw in Afghanistan. I never forget the day that I left Herat and I came to Kabul. It was a very hot war in Herat between Taliban and Afghanistan government. But Afghanistan government was too weak against the Taliban because it was a deal, better. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, in that clip we saw, the resentment is against the Americans is palpable. Too many mistakes, too many people killed as part of quote unquote collateral damage. Too many civilian deaths.
Yeah, sure. It's a big mistake from United States and also from our government. And I think a part of this mistake is also our people as well. Because our government was full of, discrimination, and also they didn't want to work for people as well. And we should accept it that the United States also did most of mistakes about Afghanistan, and especially when they make a big deal with Taliban. That it's if the United States recognize Taliban as a government, so it will be the first tourist government in the world. That still no tourist group made a government, but it is the first government that a tourist group will make in Afghanistan. So it's really funny. I don't know that United States want to do it. I don't know if when the United States did this deal with Taliban, so I don't know what they think about the Taliban. They accept them as a power as a governmental power. They made us speak with them. They made a negotiation with the Taliban as a power. So I don't know, it's a terrorist group. They killed most of Afghan people, and I'm sure that no Afghan will accept Taliban as a government, and never it will do.
Obaidullah Bahir, right now, though, the guns have gone silent, as Catherine says. I want to ask you as well, when you heard what Catherine say about that area where they filmed, which is just 2 hours outside of where you are, the capital where you are, is there a big disparity in the perception of the Taliban between the big cities and the countryside still today?
I think we're very often guilty of hasty generalizations, and we tend to pick and choose between sentiments broadcasted and showcased. I think Afghanistan's predicament has a lot more nuance to it. Of course, if we go towards delegation of blame, there's more than enough of it to go around. I mean, the United States and its allies' culturally insensitive policies of night raids, of rendition and imprisonment, and the conditions people were kept in, that added to the general idea of not having any finesse with regards to their counterinsurgency or connecting with the local population. And then they were followed by a republic that mimicked the same behavior, and we really got nowhere. And I like to say this often, that the Taliban didn't win, the Republic lost, and the people didn't support the Taliban. The people just chose to be indifferent towards the change in regime. But then when I say people as well, we have to understand that there's a difference between the rural population, the majority of the rural population, and then the urban population. The problem with the past 20 years and the change in lifestyle that came, it got limited to the urban population, and no trickle down was happening to the larger rural population. Yes, we do have a peace now. It's more of a negative peace in which there is no fighting, but nothing more is coming out of it, which it should. So the change that happened with the Taliban coming to power was that the rural population only saw the stop to the fighting, and nothing much changed about their lives otherwise. But for the educated urban population, it was a drastic change of civil liberties, of the way that they perceive their lives and their aspirations for their tomorrow. So that one group, even though smaller in number, was hit much more drastically, which is why you have guests in your studio today who had to flee Afghanistan. So I guess we very often want to see Afghanistan as 0 shades of gray, in which we want to make absolute judgments, but there's a lot more nuance to it than we like to believe.
Yeah, you mentioned a negative piece. Now the question is how to survive with the winter coming up. The economy's ground to a halt. The financial system's on the brink. The United States this week lifting restrictions on wiring dollars to loved ones from abroad. They're called personal remittances. And even if it means passing through a banking system now under the control of the Taliban, well, that's taking place. How much of a relief, Obaidullah, is that the arrival of remittances from abroad?
I mean, the sooner the international community and the Taliban get out of the staring competition that they're in, the better for Afghanistan. And this whole idea of sanctions and trying to choke out the Taliban is hitting the general population the hardest. I mean, our dollar rates went up by 20% in a day. That has sort of settled down today. People can't access their savings. So any sort of financial or cash flow that we can find within the economy is going to be important. A lot of the people that went abroad really need to support their families. A large section of the population is unemployed. But we also have to remember that Afghanistan had 70% poverty rates to begin with. Afghanistan was extremely malnourished to begin with. And then to add to that, these sanctions and the change in governance is just adding fuel to a fire that was already out of control. So the fact that it's being covered now, it's being seen now, we have to find a way to get funds into Afghanistan. And a discussion with regards to the unfreezing of Afghanistan's federal reserves is pertinent to any change, because aid is providing fish to starving Afghans, whereas they need an economy to stand by and have the ability to fish. And that happens when the Federal Reserves are released. When I say that, I don't mean hand over the money to the Taliban. There are multiple ways to do it. There are smart ways to do it. But that discussion needs to start, and it needs to start now.
And in the meantime, there is one trade, be it under the previous government or the current one, that continues to flourish. Catherine, you went to an opium market in Zari district of Kandahar province. Before we watch the clip here, tell me, that's in the south, near Kandahar.
Yeah, not too far out of Kandahar city, and these opium markets are operating throughout definitely the southern region, in Helmand province as well, because the opium trade is huge. Afghanistan is the world's biggest producer. It accounts for around 80% of it is produced, and that hasn't stopped because people are in need. They need to feed their families. These farmers have been struggling through a long drought as well, so a very poor area, and they're telling us it's just not affordable for them to grow anything else. So things like crops like pomegranates or grapes or wheat or anything else, they just have to use much more water and it costs more, and they don't get enough money to feed their families, so they're continuing to grow opium, which is then sold and becomes part of the international drugs trade. So we went to one of these opium markets to speak to some of the farmers there.
An hour's drive west of Kandahar. Every week, opium farmers come to sell their harvest. Ahmed negotiates with the poppy farmers and drug smugglers to let us in to film. Under the stalls, bags of opium paste, traders haggling for deals.
خبر سر خلاص کیا دی وای تاریخ ولی کړی مې د غوړې په سوچ تاریخ په شي نه لور چې شو کړو چې ته تمام لا زندگی صحیح چې نه سنور شهر لګري زموږ د معاملات په پلان وردا مو کلوج مرو دغه څلور نیمه کیلو دغه 15 کیلو د 2 کیلو دغه په شل زره کال دایر د کیلو موږ بل معاملات نه لرو در دغه چیر واخوت نو خپل څه چا و کورونه بمبار سول کړ ها نه مالک نرخ دا موږ په کار د کال کې یو من دوی څوک واړی څوک نه اړي دغه رقم بالا دغه معاملات در خپل کال پر دا یو منداز موږ خوراکه ده Taliban was
The Taliban did ban opium farming back in 2000, although it didn't last. Now farmers fear the emirate will try again after the peace deal signed with the US. Our presence at the opium market is drawing crowds,
so it's better to leave.
And tensions are rising. It's clear the Taliban don't have a grip on security here, and they're not in control of the crowds.
Get in quickly.
Action.
يوم مشكلة ناس Alhamdulillah, Islami Amarat.
So it was 10 minutes in and out, you say?
It was a quick trip. We wanted to stay longer, but we were told the security conditions didn't allow it. We obviously caused quite a stir. Our presence there, these people are seeing, I guess, Western journalists in places where we hadn't been able to access previously. So there's, things that we're able to film that just haven't been on our screens. I know there's a great deal of Afghan journalists who've been doing excellent work and who are in an incredibly dangerous situation right now, a lot of them, and trying to continue their work. Some 250 media organizations, TV, press, radio, online have closed down since August. So they're under pressure.
Just one more question. I'll put it first to you, Obaidullah. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the Taliban-controlled South is prime poppy growing territory in Afghanistan. We're going to show a map here that shows the areas where the UN estimates they're growing it, and the parts that are in deep red, as you can see, are right where Catherine and Romeo Langlois went to film. And as for the opium trade, well, it's risen in the past years, hasn't reached its peak from 2017. Are you expecting the Taliban to ban the opium trade like they did the first time around?
Well, one thing that Taliban have that might be beneficial in this circumstance is the lack of rationality with regards to cost-benefit analysis and the backlash from the general population for going ahead with a specific cutthroat policy. They haven't announced anything as per se yet, but even if they do, they might just decide to go ahead with it. I think it would be smarter on their part if they start discussing alternatives that they can pose to these farmers, because like we heard in the documentary, a lot of the farmers say that they have no other way to feed their families. However, Afghanistan has very fertile land for saffron farming, which is at the end of the day a very niche product that sells for a very high price. And I think there was a discussion recently from the Taliban side with regards to hemp farming, where Afghanistan's land can be used in rather than to grow weed plants, they can work on hemp and to produce CBD for medical purposes. So we can streamline this rather than carpet banning it and creating more problems than we solve. The Taliban, as soon as they figure out their way to govern Afghanistan, consolidate their group, they can move towards looking at viable alternatives to propose to those farmers.
They can look at alternatives. This is a conversation we've been having for 20 years or more, Rosina. And how do you propose an alternative to that trader who says, this is all I've got? Why are we always seem to be going back to square one on this issue?
Before answering to this question, I want to add a point. The Taliban are always saying that we bring peace and the security situation is getting better after coming of us. But I want to add this, that after the coming of Taliban, the security situation is getting too worse, because before there were explosion and there were, face-to-face fight in the provinces and also in every era. Just in the Kabul, we saw the explosions, big explosions that during every explosion we lost about 500 persons. But right now, the Taliban are killing people, secure, headingly, that no one know that what is going on. As I know, as a reporter that I work in Afghanistan, and during this time that I was in Kabul, and I was ever from Herat and Kandahar and other provinces, most of people that they work in military of Afghanistan, so they all left Afghanistan, and the people even they went to Pakistan, so the Taliban wherever that where they are, and they try to kill them even in Pakistan. So it is not a situation that people can stay in Afghanistan. Other side, the economic situation is too worse, as you seeing that how kind of situation is going on, and about the
alternative
education.
to the opium, and but the alternative to the opium. How do you go about it? What do you do?
About the education that. I want to explain that it's the right of every person, that especially about the woman, they will never accept this, that women go outside, and they will never accept the freedom of women, It's something that no one can deal with this issue, no one.
We're going to see an excerpt on that in just a moment. But when you left 20 days ago, just a final word on the economic situation there. What were people doing to get by, right?
It's about 20 days that I said I came here. So most of people told me that the situation is getting worse day by day, and we don't have another way. We should leave Afghanistan. We should. There is no way even to go to Pakistan because the border are closed, and even Iran, Pakistan border are closed with Afghanistan. So they told me that is there any way to leave Afghanistan? How you went? So the old people are just thinking about a way to leave Afghanistan. There is no hope to continue, and especially for the people that they are open-minded and they work with government organization and with NGOs that they work, and also for journalists. They just searching for a way to leave Afghanistan because I'm sure up to this time that the Taliban are in Afghanistan, so it's a crisis and no one can stay in Afghanistan.
Obaidullah, you wrote that piece for The Guardian back in August, saying that you were making a conscientious decision to stay. You said there must be a reconciliation of two worlds that can only happen when we learn to accept this new reality and go beyond our pasts. Do you stand by those words now, or do you regret them?
More than ever. This was a very conscientious decision on my part. And look, I understand your guest's sentiment, and I guess the whole title of the show being debate. I think it's interesting if we engage with each other. Maybe we can ask each other, what is the solution then? I mean, I am sure the solution cannot be, let's pack our bags and all of us leave. I do understand, I do appreciate people's security and economic concerns for wanting to leave Afghanistan. But we can't really just wipe Afghanistan off the map and move on with our lives, right? So Afghanistan is here, the Taliban are here. We haven't had a good time with them during the 20 years. We're probably not going to have a wonderful time with them now. But how do we make it work is the question. And I know there are no guidelines. There are no specific books that you could read and map onto Afghanistan. So just looking at that context means that we start engaging with the Taliban in dialogue. We try to modify their behavior, recognizing their limitations with regards to their sacred values, their reputational cost to their fighters, but also keep providing services for the Afghans that need it, create spaces in which we're acknowledged. You see, one thing about fighting and fighting for 2 decades, it creates an intractable war, which is at the core of it, a process of othering. I other you, you other me. And when we come face to face and the war is over, it's an opportunity. Do we make something out of this post-conflict society, or we just make it a preamble for another conflict that ensues in Afghanistan? And this is not just an Afghan problem. This is an international world problem, because there is going to be a spillover. And if Afghanistan can become sustainable, there will be lesser immigration, there would be lesser extremism, there will be lesser threat to the world as a whole. So maybe we can try and figure this out rather than brushing it under the carpet and hoping the problem goes away, which it won't.
And as Rosina was saying, the present is fraught with danger. And yet people are speaking out nonetheless. They may only be a few dozen nonetheless. Earlier this Thursday, women marching in the Afghan capital to demand access to food and education, the right to work. This demonstration was authorized by the new authorities. Elsewhere, it's not been the case. We're going to show an excerpt now, Catherine, where you went again to the south of Afghanistan.
Yeah, we filmed in Kabul as well, and the Kandahar region and Wardak. And we met a young lady in Kandahar who was very impressive because she was determined to carry on studying. She'd been studying at public university, which was closed following the arrival of the Taliban, and she was studying literature. She decided to switch to a private university, which is already segregated, so still those lessons allowed to carry on by the new Taliban authorities. And she described to us her day-to-day life as a young woman in a very conservative environment in the south of Afghanistan. And I really wanted to show you how she described how it was feeling, and also the courage of people who are speaking out, and the kind of indomitable spirit we found, not just with this lady, but with very many people who are trying to forge their new reality.
دوغره رو بیخی دوست ندارم. من خودم اینقدر که من خودم خواهان آزادی هستم، یعنی فکر نمی کنم که با قندار دخترها تا اندازه که من میخوام یعنی خواهان آزادی باشه. وقتی از خانه بیرون میشه باید سرش پایین باشه، حتی چهار طرف خستاد شده سعی نکنه. باید سعی نکنه، چرا که اگر یک دفعه پشت سرش ببینه دفعه دوم رایش نفر میگیره که به خاطر چی تو پشت سر خود نگاه کردی، تو دنبال چی بودی. وقتی به راه میخوای بره جرأت دیره نداره که اینا به تلفن بتونه اینا گپ بزنه. به خاطر چی؟ به خاطر که میگه اینا صدای خود بر ما نمایان میکنه.
Women have all but disappeared from the public sphere in Kandahar. Those willing to speak on camera are rare. "22-year-old student Zainab agrees to an interview in a safe place. She says that since the Taliban took power, women feel more afraid than ever.
زنها تنها حراس از این نداره که چرا درای مکاتب از ازدواج‌های اجباری دخترایشان است، از گریختاندن دخترایشان است، از شلاق خوردن دخترای جوانشان است، از تیزاب پاش کردن دخترای جوانشان است. یعنی یک حراس اینا این است که ای باشه.
Zaini Katibi, your reaction to that excerpt?
Sure, when you see a young girl that she's going to university with Bukhara, so you will feel too bad, you know. It's our right to go to university, to go to the school, and I will never forget it when I speak with this girl in Afghanistan to fix it for documentary. So many times she called me that please care about my security. Even she go to university with Bukhara, but still she worrying about the situation that she told me that maybe Taliban came to our home, maybe I faced with a problem. She told me that it's very big risk that I accepted because I want to raise my voice that world hear me.
Can the Taliban turn back the clock and keep women out of school the way they did 20 years ago? Will they be able to do it?
So you see that they do right now.
They do right now.
Yeah.
They've just arrived. But will they be able to continue doing it?
For sure. As I know about the Taliban, they will never accept it, women as a human. They believe that women are just for whom. Even 2 days ago, Taliban said that women should cover all of their body, so it is better that they be at the home, you know. They thinking like woman is just a thing for bringing children and just doing the home stuff like this and just working for their husbands. They are not human to go to the school, to go to the job place. It's their idea, you know. They are not literate people. They are illiterate people, and most of them don't know how to deal with the government. It's the problem. You know, when we say that we should negotiate with Taliban, I'm agree with this, but not as all part of a government. Just they can be a part of our country, not all part. You know, right now the United States and also the United Nations accept Taliban as all part of Afghanistan. Taliban are not all part of Afghanistan. There is other people that they are educated people. They worked for more than 20 years in Afghanistan, like women rights activists, like civil rights activists. The other people that they work in Afghanistan, you know. Right now that I'm speaking, I lost my 10 years work that I did in Afghanistan, and also about 16 years education that I did in Afghanistan. So I lost everything. And it's the situation of all women, every day I'm in connection with the women rights activists. So they're crying, they're saying that we can't go ahead with this kind of situation. We don't have the right to go to even our workplace. When we went to our workplace, so the Taliban told me that it's not your place, go home. So it is the situation. How can we deal with this kind of situation? It's impossible.
Obaidullah Bahir, UN statistics show that it's 20% of the workforce in Afghanistan that's female. Now, that's not a big number, but it's 20% more than it was when the Taliban ruled the last time. With all the economic woes we were discussing earlier, can the Taliban afford to keep women out of the workforce, to keep them out of school?
I think economic sense ends up prevailing with time. The changes that we saw in Saudi Arabia and in Iran, though the contexts are a little different, but there was improvement in the way that women were viewed and their rights and the conditions that were afforded to them. I think the Taliban are showing some sort of reciprocation towards international pressure and general Afghan demand. The Taliban have been talking about a means to gain internal legitimacy, and they've been reaching out to different states in order to acquire recognition. And all of that is going to be contingent on basically the civil rights they offer Afghans. There is specific limitations to the Taliban as well. The Taliban were a fluid insurgency for 20 years. The fact that they have to consolidate into one cohesive organization with rank and file is taking time. This is a teething process. It's going to be arduous. It's going to be tricky. But we're hoping that when the Taliban get there, that they start making sense of what their actions entail, and how to go about them. The whole ban on women workforce or even education, the education thing, we've seen the unbanning happen in specific provinces, and they're trying to work out how it would happen within Kabul. But they would have to deal with it. They have to reconcile with the new Afghanistan. And that's where pressure from within and pressure from outside is going to help modify the Taliban
Is going to help
behavior,
perhaps change the calculus. Catherine Norris-Trent, what anecdotal evidence can you bring us from your travels there?
About women's rights? We met women who were very scared, women activists in the big cities who were very scared about their future, as Rosina was saying, and didn't really see a way forward. They're hoping that international pressure and economic pressure on the new authorities will change things somewhat, but there's very little optimism among them, I'm afraid to say. A lot of courage, but not much optimism at this stage. And conditions are getting harder and harder for people every day. People selling off everything they've got to eat, people trying to feed their families. We met women in camps for displaced people in Kabul who sold their own children, who'd sold their babies to survive. And this was back in October when we filmed there. Now, as I'm sure Obaidullah will confirm, the situation's getting worse. It started snowing in Kabul and it's very cold and people are getting desperate. So the Taliban have been saying we need more time, but people are running out of time. Yeah, we can show those images of the first snowfall in Kabul of the season. What does that, in your mind, Rosina, conjure up when you see these images that are here up on the screen?
About the Afghanistan, it is a situation that we can explain with words. It's good that we're speaking about Afghanistan from a safe place. It's okay, but in Afghanistan, when you go, when you see the situation, when you see the poor people, when you see the little children that they're asking just for one Afghani, when you see the people that they're selling their children, so when you're seeing the people that they lost their everything, so it's the situation that just we can cry about the situation. It's not something that we can explain it, but it's all because of our weak government and also the Taliban that they killed people during this 20 years, and also they coming to make government. For us, it is really funny, and I believe it, and I'm sure, and you will see that Taliban never can make a government in Afghanistan because from the time that the Taliban came to Kabul up to now, I'm always following the situation. They always saying that women don't have the right to go to work. The women are like this. Women are like this. The all rule in Afghanistan is about women. There is not any story about the food. There is no plan about economic situation. Even Hassan Ahund, the Taliban leader, said that if you don't have food, so it is the God decide. It is not our field. We didn't promise Afghanistan people that we will bring food for you. So it is a big joke that a leader of a country saying like this. And I'm sure that these people can't make anything in Afghanistan good for our people. It was a big mistake that United States did with Taliban, and also our government also accepted.
Our thoughts with the people of Afghanistan. Rosina Khatibi, I want to thank you for being with us. I want to thank Obaidullah Bahir for being with us as well from Kabul. The documentary is called Inside the Emirate.
That is correct.
And it airs Saturday on our channel, but is available on our website. Catherine Norris-Trent, many thanks.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.